Hello, welcome to a new episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green. And with me today to talk about Ring Straight's Ruin of the Giant King, which is an epic title. And I'm really looking forward to talking about this, is Brian Keith McPherson. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just had my birthday a couple days ago. I'm getting a
Happy
little
birthday.
older, but it's a brand new year. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
also
so,
just saw the new Spider-Man movie yesterday, which I really enjoyed. So I'm a
oh
little
yeah,
bit riding on a high today. So
I
yeah.
no spoilers because I really want to go watch that.
No, no spoilers. I wouldn't do that to you. I'm
And I've
sorry.
not had time to watch it. And they've just brought in a new curfew over here where like cinemas have to close at 8 o'clock.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
like, when can I go and watch this? Because I want to go watch the new Matrix movie as well.
Oh,
So
sure.
yeah, I might have to just go in the morning one of the days. Just be like instead of
Yeah, I
going.
ended up going during the day just to squeeze it in between kids and other stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're one of these unlucky people that have a birthday in the same kind of week as Christmas, then.
Yeah, but not as bad as my dad, right? My dad was actually born on Christmas.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and he was from an old Irish Catholic family here in America. So you can
right.
imagine all of the sort of rigmarole that went into that, right?
Yeah.
The Irish Catholic mother thought he was a second coming, I think.
Yeah, that must be the worst thing in the world, being born on Christmas Day, isn't it? Like, really, like,
Yeah,
I mean, there's worse things in the world, obviously, but
sure, obviously. But as
but
far as birthdays go, yeah, not
yeah,
great.
yeah, Christmas Day, like, because everything, like, I don't know, like, my son, like, we were talking this off camera before. My son just turned 4. His birthday was this week, just gone. It was a few
Okay.
days ago, and he's already kind of realizing that everything happens in the same week. So he was like, "Can I like have another birthday during the year?" And it's like, well,
Yeah. I,
maybe.
I I think the number of birthday cards that my dad got that mentioned Jesus in them was probably one for at least every year of his life.
But
Probably more than that.
God. Oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, mine's in January. So, but I think it's kind of my sister-in-law's birthday is near mine. We're both in January, and we were talking one time about being born in December before Christmas or like in that month after. And we actually think it's worse to be born after because at
Mhm.
least when in the lead up to Christmas, you've got like that you've got the buzz of Christmas is coming, people have got money, they want to go out and have drinking and stuff. In January, no one wants to do anything.
Sure. Yeah. And they're all past like their gift purchasing phase, right? They're kind of like, I'm over it.
Yeah, and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh no, we have to do something for this guy, like we're like really kind of like just completely unwanted and unwelcome January birthdays. And obviously as well, January is it's a toss up between January and February about which is the worst month of the year. It's
My
been
son's in February. So yeah, it's I was like, well, what are we gonna do? I don't know. It's gonna be an indoor birthday somewhere. It's cold.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So anyway, that's what we're here to talk about today. We're not here to talk about these things today. We're here to talk about your book and you.
Sure.
So first of all, like, how did you have you always wanted to write a book? Was it something that, I mean, I see your Star Wars t-shirt. I've read up a little bit about you, so I see that you're into all the kind of same stuff that I was in the 80s and 90s, and I
Yeah.
presume into
Yeah.
fantasy and everything as well. Was it something that you were, as a fan, you were like, I want to do something like this, or did you just wake up one day and be like, I have an idea, I'm going to do it?
I mean, I think I've been kicking around ideas, but early when I was out of college, actually in high school, I always wanted to like draw comic books, but my artistic skills never really hit that pitch, right? And but there was always ideas swirling around. So like for me, and like X-Men comics were things that I was aware of. We didn't really have them in my house, but I would get some once in a while from friends, or I would go to comic book shops and I would look at them, and of course you get pulled in. And I was always kicking around ideas like that. And when I wrote this book, I sometimes tell people I wrote it by accident, but that's more about the plot of the book than it is
Right.
how I wrote the book. So this book's actually a long time in coming, and one of the things I'm slowest to is actually marketing it. But it's a long time in coming because the writing process started quite a while ago, and it was, you have to think about like back when Game of Thrones was winding down. the Avengers movies were coming to a head with like Infinity War and Endgame. And I was thinking like, well, what's next? And there was all this, kind of concept of, well, what will be the next big thing? And I thought, well, I just don't want to wait.
Right.
So essentially what I did is like, I started thinking about what I would do, and what kind of stuff I would do. And that's how the process gets started of writing the book. And then, kind of takes turns in terms of what you plan on and where you end up.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it gets started.
So
Yeah.
you basically saw a gap in your own interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Fill
don't
the
want to wait
gap.
for someone else. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can see the point because you're right because there was that kind of phase around 2018, 2019 where
Mm-hmm.
there was this pause coming and all this kind of stuff, and then obviously then the pandemic came, paused everything,
Sure.
right?
Right. Right.
Because
Took a big pause.
yeah, because I'm a big fantasy fan, so I was really looking forward to Witcher season 2 and the Wheel of Time TV show, and it was like I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, these are going to come out in 2020. That's going to be fine, and then it's like, nope, they've just come out now at the end of 2021. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So, were you always? Are you a big fantasy fan yourself? Were you reading fantasy as a kid?
No, it's kind of one of those things, and my kids are probably going to keep popping in and out. So big special guest stars, I guess,
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
the show. No, I didn't. I was more of a TV and movie and cartoon guy,
Yeah.
and so I didn't read a lot of fiction growing up over the years. And in fact, now that I'm kind of writing fiction, I get a lot of people encouraging me saying, "Hey, you should really read this and read that." And I think, as a matter of craft, it makes a lot of sense. But I have this reluctance because I'm like, well, if I start pulling into that stuff, is it gonna kind of seep into my own writing in a way that's subconsciously basically not creative anymore? I'm starting to pull things in. I'm like, ideas that aren't my own.
Yeah.
So I'm reluctant to get too far into the world that exists out there.
Right. Right. I mean, that's part of that. That is a thing that happens. It does subconsciously come, but also you can do it without even realizing it as well. Sometimes,
Sure.
like I know that from experience. I mean, I was one of these people. Like I used to read. You'd hear about, like a successful series would come along, like Harry Potter, and then like loads of people would sue J.K. Rowling and say she ripped off my idea. Like I wrote about this thing in the 70s or whatever. And I'd be like, maybe she did, maybe she saw it, and then and she'd be like, no, I never heard of this thing, and I was like,
Right. Right.
that can't be true. But then I wrote a book called Dead Man Walking, which is a urban fantasy kind of thing, and I was aware of the Dresden Files, but I'd never read any of them, but I was aware of it.
Sure.
And then I was kind of like, and then as I was kind of like finished the book, and I was kind of like, thought, you know what, I'll read this because I'd mentioned it to a few people, this book that I was working on, given the premise, and they're like, oh, have you read Dresden? I was like, no, and they're like, you should read Dresden, and I was like, okay. So I finished the book, and I was like, as a treat, I'll read the first Dresden book, and I was like, this is quite similar to what I've just written. But
Yeah. And
it's different
the
enough, but it's similar as well. And it's just like, well, you know what? What am I going to do about it?
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, first of all, there's genres of stuff. So, I don't think you're gonna ever create something wholly new that somebody goes, oh, we don't know what this thing is, and this is all completely whole cloth, something different. But what I'm trying to do is kind of pull back into those things that I have a lot of nostalgia for growing up. The things that sometimes you go see a movie, like I just saw one the other day. I won't get into like what it is or spoilers or anything, and you're like, man, this nailed it, right? They pulled on all those strings and my heartstrings are getting tugged on, and I really enjoyed this movie. And other times you watch a movie or you watch a series and you're like, this kind of fell flat. I don't understand why someone with this much resources can't produce good writing. And so what I'm trying to do a lot of times is get the writing going, right? Put in the dialogue and the story and the arc and stuff like that. And I don't really care sometimes if in terms of genres or in terms of concepts that necessarily overlaps what's already out there. I just want to do it well, so that when I consume something, or when I even reflect on my own work, I go, man, this is fulfilling. It might be very similar to this other thing in terms of a generic type, but I feel like this is well done. So that's where I feel like my creative niche is trying to get into that quality instead of just coming up with a whole new thing out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, sure. So why don't you? I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about Ring Strix? Like, what is it about, and
Sure.
where did you get the idea for it as well? Once you told us about it.
Yeah, so this will circle back to me saying I wrote it by accident. So I intended to, so the book is actually set in the ancient Middle East, right? If you think back again, I mentioned, I think maybe before we started the actual official interview here, that I grew up from an Irish Catholic family. So we grew up going to church and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of lore around ancient Middle East coming out of any culture that has like a biblical background, right? Or is familiar with that. Kids grow up with that. So I said it back then. But what I intended to do was originally write a much more modern book that spanned the last couple centuries up to the modern times. And what I was trying to do was like, well, what's the backstory? Like, how do we get here? How is this normal? And as I started like thinking through the writing process, I was like, man, I'm doing a lot of just telling stuff, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should be showing it, right? I should be describing this world. I should be walking through the story of this world. So I started writing kind of a backstory, and then sooner or later I realized I was writing so much backstory that the backstory was basically the story. So what I ended up writing was like the ancient start of all this stuff, and then the idea is to play through and eventually get to modern times. But that doesn't really tell you much about what's in the content of the book, other than it's basically fantasy that's set in the ancient Middle East. So
Yeah,
yeah.
cool. And is it, what kind of I mean, what can we expect going into it? Like, is it, what kind of is it multiple POV? Is it first person or third person, like that kind of thing?
It's multiple, right? You have multiple characters. The essential premise, and I'm going to put this in like really rudimentary terms, probably because it's going to hit a lot of tags for people, is like, the fundamental question was like, what if superheroes were real? Again, this is not new ground. There's a lot of stuff out there that The Boys, for example, a TV show, I think has a really gritty take on what this would be like. And so it's not a new concept, but I was thinking like, well, if they were real, a lot of these concepts today are like, well, people discover that they're real. There's some sort of agency or something like that introduces them into the world and that kind of thing. And what I wanted to do was like, well, no, what if they've been here all along and it was just part of culture, and you grew up in a culture where you knew these things? You probably even think of them as superheroes, right? They had some other role in culture. And so what essentially I set up was that this idea that there's people with powers that exist, and there's essentially one in every nation, and there's, as this is happening at the sort of early stages of this history, they're discovering this. The nations are discovering it. The kings are discovering it. The people themselves, the people with the powers are themselves discovering it, and they're trying to figure out what their purpose is, right? And so they each have unique set of gifts. There are no two that are exactly alike. And so as the story goes on, you learn about one over here, and then you learn about one over there, and then eventually things culminate in such a way that they're going to interact with each other. And this happens multiple times throughout the book, so that everything kind of comes together. But yeah, you learn from different characters, male characters, female characters, in different cultures in that setting.
Nice. And it's a big book as well. It's like, it's not, for a debut book, it's not, you often get like smaller attempts, but this is
Right.
530 pages long, so it's a decent sized one.
It's so I you don't start off going, I'm going to write 530 pages, right? In fact, again, if you come from my background where you haven't read a lot of fiction, you don't know what's too big and what's too small, right? So
Right.
you do a lot of research online to kind of figure it out. But what ends up happening is, for all your research, the story tells itself, right? You're writing as long as there's story to tell, and things tend to wind down in a certain way. I tend to be one of those writers that does a lot of planning ahead, but then I also have to leave room for things to change over the course of the story, because sometimes you're like writing, and there's some magic happening, and when that magic happens, you don't want to go, well, but I got to stick to the plan. You want to be open enough to let it change course a little bit and then adapt the plan. But I do find that like I had about as much as 530 pages worth of story to tell, and then it wound down. So it worked out really well, but I didn't realize at the start it was going to be that much.
And is this the start of a series, or is it a one and done, or do you have is there more stories in this? Obviously, you said before it was started off as a backstory for a different story
Right.
that you're doing. So I presume that you're going to have more stories to tell.
Yeah, they're up here, and so I'm trying to figure out how to, because this story was simpler in the sense that any origin story is, and this is sort of the origin of the world. But now I've got to figure out, well, how things evolve past that, and not to just fall into sort of tropes and things that have been done before. And then there's also like the sort of filtering process, right? Because I'm sure it's like this for a lot of people who write, but I have so many ideas. And then I think, yeah, but this is going to overcomplicate it. I mean, how many times have you gone into like a sequel or something, having loved the first thing, and then you realize that as you get into the story of the sequel, they have overcomplicated the heck out of this thing to the point where you're like, the thing that I loved about this is now lost. You've completely changed it, like in a way that wasn't a natural evolution for the thing. It wasn't kind of like an interesting change. It was like you didn't know what to do with it. And so like that's where my brain is trying to take this stuff and go, how do I take it and have it find out what people loved, what I loved about the first book, and carry that forward rather than basically making it too much and too complicated. So I'm trying to be careful about that. But yeah, that's the intention, is to take it forward.
We'll see what it goes, because obviously a lot of, especially fantasy writers, a lot of them have that and just go, you know what, I'm just going to make this series 15 books long and just put it all in there. Right?
Yeah.
Which happens, which happens with them as well. So it is a fine line to kind of walk. So obviously this book is out now, and it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle Unlimited as well. What is your plan for 2022? Is it more just promoting this book, or are you hoping to get to work on other things?
Yeah, it turns out that promoting is probably the one thing it's one of many things that just I don't take naturally to. I'm working with somebody online now that's really helping me kind of position this for 2022, just to start getting out there, and placing the book in context where it will get some exposure. So that I think I'm going to spend a lot of time focused on that, at least at the start of the year, and then at some point, I really am eager to start writing the next series of books, but I've got to balance that with my ordinary life as Clark Kent, so to speak. I have a day job that I have to do. Right. So it's coming. It's just like, how do you balance all of it out? The good news is I always have like a certain amount of time at night that I can just sit down in front of a computer and start writing. But I don't want to charge too far into writing until I have some sense of how to decomplicate all these ideas and hit some really meaningful threads for different characters.
Right. That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, best of luck with that, and best of luck with getting the book into people's hands. It's definitely a very interesting premise, and it's piqued my interest anyway. So that's cool. So where's best to find you for people that are watching either on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Music? And if you are on either of those and you've never been to the channel before, please do subscribe, people at home. But where's the best place for people to find you?
Well, so I'm, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, the promotion side of the book writing is something I'm pretty new to, in addition to writing books as a whole. But I've got a Facebook page. It's called Popcorn Myth, popcorn.myth, like popcorn mythology. There's also an Instagram and a Twitter handle for both of those as well. The Twitter is @popcornmyth. And so again, what these are based around is, again, I grew up out of the 80s and 90s. I have a lot of nostalgia attached to some TV shows and movies from that time. And as I think on my own writing, and I think on things that are coming out now, I often think about it in terms of what I like about some of those things, even though they were sometimes underdone or corny. As a kid, you fill in a lot of blanks, and I'm trying to sort of touch on that with the idea of popcorn mythology, things we grew up with, mythology that became ours culturally while we were eating popcorn, essentially. So those would be two. Twitter is @popcornmyth, and then Facebook is popcorn.myth, and that's largely where I've tried to do a little bit of work, but it's still a work in progress for sure.
All those links will be in the show notes below. So if you're listening and watching, just click on below and you'll be able to find those. And also Brian's Amazon page will be there too, where you can check out his book. Brian, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciated the conversation.
Not at all. And everyone, thanks for staying with us till the end. Until next time.